represented as permanent secretaries, heads of department, and also agencies. Certainly, we recognize that there are women who are still, because of poverty, because of economic circumstances, have not been able to reach uh, their, their correct place in the society. And therefore, one of the interventions by the government has been to invest in training and training. And so, with the goal project I reported to you yesterday in my presentation, 21,000 people have been trained in a variety of courses from certificate, diploma, degrees across all 10 regions of Guyana, and 60% of those are female. The WIN program, which I also referred to yesterday, shows the number of women who go through that program and who have been trained in the last 3 years, particularly in relation to setting up small businesses, business incubator, and being able to access small loans, etc. So there are 1,000 women in the last, since we've introduced the WIN program, have been able to acquire not only skills, but being able to have access to business and creating businesses. The WIN program also has reached 11,670 women from across the country with no formal training, were trained to in vocational areas. Out of a sample size, 45% gained employment, while 25% started their own businesses. We, we believe that these opportunities to ensure that women are trained. I also reported yesterday that in our teacher training college, we have the largest intake of 5,000 in this school year, and that, as usual, the number of teachers are majority female. The public service is majority female in Guyana, as in many parts of the Caribbean. And so the challenges that women face, of course, as all women, particularly the fact that we have a high level of single parents in our country, not necessarily biological mothers, but aunties, grannies, and others who take care of children, that a number of interventions have taken place through the social welfare programs to ensure that they are able to access public assistance and other forms of assistance with children. One of the issues, of course, for women that is important is access to daycare services, and this is something that is being worked on and expanded. We wish to remind the committee that in the 2022 edition of the Global Gender Gap Report, which covers 146 countries, Guyana was ranked 35th in the overall ranking, moving up 18 points from the 53rd ranking in 2021. Guyana also ranks sixth in the overall regional ranking for Latin America and the Caribbean, and therefore Guyana has made significant progress towards gender equality. Um, in the same report, 2015, for example, it showed that Guyana had one of the highest um, number of women who own property versus the rest of Latin America and Caribbean. And this is because of the National Housing Program, where 44% of the house owners under the government housing program are able to access property, buy property at subsidized prices and build their homes or be able to acquire low income houses. And so 44% of the women of Guyana who have applied for house lots between 2020 and 2023 have been able to attain have become property owners, which is over a very high percentage in our country and compared with others. The, in addition to that, the Ministry of Housing offers 85%, offers 85% of those who are able to access housing subsidies, home improvement subsidies, went to women. And 65% of the core homes, these are homes that are built already by the government, these have been given to women. So that there's a very clear policy of the government in terms of enhancing the status of women, in assisting women to be able to get their rightful place, not only in terms of education and employment, but in terms of property and being able to set up their own businesses. The ministry of housing offers 85% of those who are able to access housing subsidies, home improvement subsidies, went to women. And 65% of the core homes, these are homes that are built already by the government, these have been given to women. So that there's a very clear policy of the government in terms of enhancing the status of women, in assisting women to be able to get their rightful place, not only in terms of education and employment, but in terms of property and being able to set up their own businesses. The issue was raised by the first member who asked questions about allegations that foreigners have no recourse before the courts. This is absolutely untrue, absolutely untrue. And that we wish to point to a case where the number of Haitians in Guyana who were apprehended by the police, they went to the courts on a constitutional motion and they won the case. There are a number of other cases with trafficking in persons where foreign women in particular are able to have protection under the Trafficking in Person Act and be able to also be protected by our laws in terms of appearing in court. The second case I want to refer to with a foreign woman based on the question that was raised, in 2023, a woman who was from Jamaica was awarded $3.1 million after the High Court found that she was unlawfully detained for a period of time. So it is absolutely untrue. And so we reject that completely. The issue of So the access to the judiciary is available, as well as we wish to remind the committee that we have rights commissions which do not distinguish between citizens and non-citizens in our country in terms of making reports of allegations of discrimination, in terms of gender equality or discrimination, as well as matters relating to children and indigenous people. We wish to point out that all these rights commissions present their annual reports, and any purview of those would show what cases are being brought before them. A number of allegations that are being made here today have never been reported to the rights commissions, and many have never seen the courts or a police station. The issue of the sexual offenses, we wish to point out that in the period under review, 2021 to now, that we have seen an increase in the number of cases coming before the court, as well as convictions, both in domestic violence and sexual violence. And that this is an important improvement to show that, one, there's an increase in reporting and an increase in the police taking it seriously and taking the matters forward. A lot of investment has gone into training police in terms of dealing with domestic and sexual violence cases. The police stations, in most police stations, the largest stations, have rooms for victims of domestic violence and sexual violence so that they're protected and given confidentiality in their reports, particularly with children. The support that is given to victims of violence, there are many interventions that are given in terms of the shelters that were mentioned. In that we have two fully functioning shelters operated by the Ministry of Human Services and Social Security in regions that are coastal, not in the capital. And while there is an NGO, Help and Shelter, that receives an annual government subvention, the Human Services Ministry also has a family care center which provides safe spaces for children who are survivors of domestic violence. We have also, in addition to the legal aid clinic and the legal aid clinic in Linden, the ministry has also commenced subsidized legal aid services under the Pro Bono initiative in 2023. It is not started very long ago, in which 3,000 men and women have benefited from the initiative through free legal consultations via referrals and at outreaches and training. A number of these relate to applications for protection orders and occupation orders. We also offer, in terms of victims of violence, there is the protection of the courts, there is the safe houses, as we call them, as well as support to the families in terms of helping them to be able to get out of abusive relations. So it's not just about court, it's ensuring that our women are able to escape from abusive relations. The Hope and Justice Center has a comprehensive gender-based violence service delivery. It's a one-stop shop that was opened in 2024 this year earlier, and it is not in the capital, it's in the coastal areas. Safe vouchers are provided for victims and survivors of gender-based violence, and these are supported by the private sector. Survivors are also assisted with food hampers and also in support with, from the difficult circumstances unit of the Ministry of Human Services, providing 3 months rent for GBV survivors so they can relocate. Public assistance is also given to victims of violence, and there are survivors advocates in all the 10 regions of Guyana who have been able um, to assist 3,328 women who were able to get support from the survivors advocates. We wish to state that the 914 hotline has been an important tool in helping women to report, or not only women, children, or even men, to report domestic and sexual violence. The last 1,200 women were assisted through the 914 hotline in addressing domestic violence. Psychosocial support is given to victims, and also there has been specific gender-based violence training for social workers, guidance counselors at the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Home Affairs, Ministry of Health, the main tertiary hospital, the Guyana Police Force, and the Guyana Prison. And of course, there are survivors kits that are provided to victims. So a number of the number of cases, whilst they have been increasing, they've also seen conviction rates going up higher than what it was in our 2015 report to the UPR, where approximately 60% of those who are sexual violence are being convicted. This is an important change in terms of the way the courts address these cases 10 years ago and 15 years ago. In the issue of the question asked about on the way the sexual offenses court function, I'm glad the member recognized that we have 3 sexual offenses courts, and the Caribbean Court of Justice was high in praise, that's our apex court, was high in praise of Guyana for being the first country in the CARICOM to produce and to establish sexual offenses courts in our country. The question that was asked in terms of how do the sexual offenses courts function. The courts are fitted with specialists, including psychologists and counselors, who support alleged victims navigate the prosecutions. The court also has special rooms for which victims can give evidence. This room is separate from the general court chambers, away from the accused. The victim can also see what is taking place, but is insulated and protected. We also allow in our laws video evidence being given. Judges are also trained on how to conduct trials which involve victims of sexual offenses. The question was asked about the number of judicial staff and the rate of conviction. The 3 courts have 1 judge each, and for 2016 there was an average of 10% conviction rate, while in 2017 there was an average 25% conviction rate. In 2018, this average was 60% conviction rate, and from the newspapers' reports, we are able to see that that is holding in our judicial area. In regards to the issue of medical termination and the issues that have been raised, based on the available data that we have for 2021 and 2023, there have been no reports of major complications following the conduct of medical termination pregnancy procedures, and therefore the service remains professional and safe. We must inform the committee that not everyone can carry out an abortion in Guyana. Under the termination law, one has to be trained and certified by the medical council to be able to do the procedures. So whilst in a number of hospitals there may be doctors, they cannot do the procedure unless they have been trained and found competent enough to be able to carry out the abortions. And so this is a matter that is incrementally being dealt with, but that across the country, women have access to post abortion services in terms of forms of birth control, alternatives. So we do not want, and we never wanted when we brought the Termination Act in, that it would be seen as an alternative or a form of birth control. We wanted to enhance and protect the right of women to choose what they wanted to do with their bodies. Um, the issues that were raised to do with maternal mortality and the levels of breast cancer and the allegation that women do not receive adequate care. If I can deal with the issue of maternal mortality first, um, the maternal mortality of 2022, according to the Ministry of Health, was 113 to every 100,000. Reminded our population is under 800,000. 2023, the rate has been reduced to 93 out of every 100,000. And so we can, and in 2000, when this report and the concluding remarks were made by the committee, at that time it was 190 um, out of every 100,000. A lot of training and improvements has gone in the maternal care, training of doctors and nurses, and ensuring that health centers across the country, the primary health care that are all funded by the government, are able to address issues of pregnant women and to be able to refer them in cases of high-risk mothers or complications. The issue in regards to the interior, that the doctors in the interior locations in Amerindian communities can request a medivac to be able to send out patients that have complications in order to ensure that we reduce any mortality amongst women in far away areas. And so medivacs are paid for by the government and the Ministry of Health to ensure that we're able to preserve life and the life of the mother and the baby. The Regarding the issue of breast cancer, there is a unit of the Ministry of Health dedicated to breast and cervical cancer. And five staff, that is four doctors and who are specialists, are dedicated to monitoring and looking at what are the instances and how to improve them. There are no reports of inadequate care, and there are a number of NGOs who are working with the government in this area. Um, Again, you are referring to reports that have never been reported anywhere in the domestic remedies that are available. And so it is difficult for us to answer these when we've never heard of them. There's been no cases that have been raised. One of the problems with breast cancer is the issue of early detection. And the same thing with cervical cancer and prostate cancer, which are the three highest forms of cancer in Guyana. The issue of early detection of people going to the health centers or the hospitals to be checked. The problem in many cases, by the time women go to the hospitals, that they have stage 3 and stage 4. And so the educational programs to make people and to educate people to go early to look at the warning signs in relation to breast cancer is very important in increasing the chances of people surviving from breast cancer. The issues that were raised regarding the civil forfeiture. We have a number of cases which we could have referred to yesterday, but because of time, but there have been a number of cases, and I wish to go back to that issue. First of all, in the acts of corruption, there have been 6 former ministers and former members of the Guyana Elections Commission who have been charged on counts of conspiracy to defraud the electorate, and they are before the court since 2021. We also have documents on the police charge for corruption. In 2021, 13 police officers were charged. In 2022, 14 were charged. And in 2023, 6 were charged. So that there are efforts in terms of these figures may look small to you, but in terms of what was before, this is an improvement in the number of police who are held accountable. One of the questions in relation to police officers, as I'm on that, of interpersonal violence with their partners, I wish to report that 26 police officers have been charged with areas of interpersonal violence with their partners or ex-partners and have been charged and are before the courts. With regards to the death penalty, we spoke about that yesterday, but I wish to remind the committee, and we reported before the UPR in 2014, that, and we had committed in the first UPR in 2010, that we would be amending the Act to change the mandatory aspects of the death penalty. The 2010 amendment has made it clear that in terms of killing a police officer, a judicial officer, and their line of duty, that this would have the death sentence. And in terms of the Hijacking and Piracy Act, if one kills persons in a boat and murder them, that it is also treated as a death sentence. And in fact, there has been a case of 7 people were murdered and in a piracy case, and that the persons who were charged have been charged and sentenced to death. So we have changed the categorization in the act itself, and so life imprisonment and parole are available to all persons that are before the courts on these serious crimes, and that in fact those who are charged can also appeal their cases all the way up to the Caribbean Court of Justice, which is our apex court. We also was asked what other forms. The courts have been loath to execute, to sentence persons to death, give them a death sentence, and generally have been talking about life imprisonment and parole after 20 years. Questions were asked about the EPA, the Environmental Protection Order, and the issue of stakeholders. The Environment Protection Act makes it compulsory for the agency to have consultation with stakeholders, particularly on issues that relate to the communities and the people in those communities. The point was raised that Exxon doesn't consult, and that is absolutely untrue. Exxon does not only deal with the government, the Exxon has had a number of consultations open to the public to deal with a number of issues. So again, these are exaggerations. The issue of access to information in terms of the agreements of 2016, these were not made public till 2017, and we have made commitments in the Paris Agreement and the Paris Protocols with the LCDS, and we have also made commitments on FPIC. The issue that the committee is referring to is a particular NGO that after Guyana had given out 15% of its carbon credits that it received to the 200 odd communities after consulting them on the low carbon development strategy 2030, as well as on the process for accessing the 15% of the carbon market revenue that Guyana made. This organization went to the ART trees and claimed that there was no consultation with the villages. ART trees did their own investigation and dismissed that it was untrue. The APA also went on, Amerindian Peoples' organization, as an NGO, went on to appeal the decision, and again they were rejected. And I advise the committee to look at the press statement that has been issued by the ART trees in regard to these allegations. Regarding the illegal operations of minors in Amerindian communities, we wish to remind the committee that the Amerindian Act requires that anybody operating within an Amerindian community must have the permission of the Amerindian Village Council to mine and to carry out their work, and they're bound by the environmental laws of Guyana and the mining laws of Guyana. But we wish to state that water, that is the rivers, do not belong to anybody. They're public property. Questions were asked about the Police Complaints Authority, and that the Police Complaints Authority, the parole boards, the private visiting committees. Yes, all the private visiting committees have been appointed and reappointed from 2021 to today. They served for 2 years and they've all been reappointed. The parole board has been reestablished and is appointed and functioning. The Police Complaints Authority is also functioning, and that they have powers under legislation, which is the Police Complaints Authority Act number 9 of 1989. The Police Complaints Authority has the authority to be able to investigate all allegations regarding abuse by police, whether it is corruption, taking a bribe, whether it's physical abuse, and even when it is murder. And the figures I gave yesterday on the number of complaints that were brought to the Police Complaints Authority. It is headed by a former retired judge as required by the law. There was a point made in the closing of the last speaker that children were not separated from adults in regards to cases where children are either victims or perpetrators. This is absolutely untrue. Absolutely untrue. Children are not kept in the same location as adults in prison or in the police stations. They are separated all the time from the adults. This issue of lack of legal guarantees to children, some of the questions that we were asked, and it's been difficult for us to understand because there's much, whether it's the phrasing of the questions, we're not sure, or the translation. But we have a compendium of laws which are in compliance with the Rights of the Child Convention, with the Protection of Child's Act, the new Adoption Act, bringing us in compliance with the Hague Convention, and in terms of the Development Services Act, etc. The issue of, and therefore, they're constitutional human rights guarantees, and they're also guarantees to do with law. All child victims they are under the custody of the Child Protection and Care Authority, and so they manage the care and and monitor the care of children that are in conflict with the law, as well as those who would be victims of violence. The the last question that was point was made. I had reported in my opening statement that the Restorative Justice Act bill and the bail bill became acts. So the question asked if they're put into effect. Yes, they've been put into effect. They were passed in the National Assembly, as I reported yesterday. And so these are no longer bills. They have been debated and passed. The reports we have on prison, we are waiting probably further questions on that. But there's been an important reduction in pretrial detainees, moving from 21% in 2020 to 13% in 2023. And we have the figures to show that it's moved from 21% 2020, the same 20% in 2021, 2022 was 18%, and 2023, 13%. We also have, based on the UN Working Group on Peoples of African Descent and their condemnation of one of the prisons, in the last 3 years, we've spent a lot of time and money improving the conditions of that prison, including making sure that the prisoners have proper food, proper and safe situations and facilities, as well as to reduce the overcrowding within that prison. And we're also building a women's prison. The issue was asked about what remedies for persons found to be wrongfully convicted and any compensation. Persons who are wrongfully convicted may file actions in Guyana's court in tort or on a constitutional law for any damages they claim they suffered. There have and continue to be cases for wrongful imprisonment and malicious prosecution for persons who believe they were victims of these conduct. In 2020, a family was awarded 10 million for unlawful arrest. In 2023, a woman was awarded 2.2 million for unlawful arrest and detention. In January 2024, another person sued the state for 35 million for unlawful imprisonment. These instances were unfortunate, but we realize that there are issues that even states such as the United States and the United Kingdom continue to battle with. And what we are showing is that the courts of Guyana are open and accessible to persons who feel they've been wrongfully dealt with either by the law, the police, or by the courts themselves. A question was asked about the Quinton Bacchus killing by the police. The police officer was arrested and charged. He's also been dismissed from the Guyana Police Force. These steps show he was not acting in accordance with the police practice and protocols. The prosecution is ongoing of the officer. As I said, there are many questions. I may have missed some because of the rapidity to try to keep up with the questions, but we're open to answer any following questions. There's one more. Yeah.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Head of Delegation, Ms. Gail Teixeira, for those responses provided. We very much appreciate your replies. And we are also aware that time is not on our side. We have little time in hand to be able to provide perhaps in-depth answers, but we do, of course, have tomorrow in hand, and you will also, of course, be able to send any missing information or supplementary information in writing in line with the procedure of the committee. We now have some follow-up questions, beginning with Ms. Tigruja. You have the floor. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Head of Delegation. We are aware of the number of questions that we have put to you, but I think that is indicative of just how keen we are to know how the convention or covenant is applied in your state party. I was rather surprised, by the very specific information that we requested and rather general nature of your replies, which is perhaps partially explained by the lack of time. But often you didn't go into detail in your responses. You simply said categorically the information is erroneous, it's false, and then moved straight on. But I do want to come back to some of those questions because, as I said at the outset yesterday, we have cross-checked our information. It's credible. It comes from various different sources. When we choose to ask a question off the back of information that we have received from different sources, we do verify that information. We cross-check it. As I say, we check against various different sources. So we're convinced of the credibility of the background to the questions that we're asking you. I'd like to come back, therefore, to this question of the detention of children and the fact that they're held with adults. We had a very specific and categorical response to that concern. And I hope that the delegation will provide additional information to the response provided orally, beyond simply saying that the information that we have received is false. I also want to come back to this link between ExxonMobil Guyana, or ExxonMobil Guyana, and its activities in Guyana, and its links or ties with the Environmental Protection Agency. I didn't hear, certainly I didn't catch any answer you may have given about the allegations of corruption, allegations that were lodged in 2016. It was alleged that ExxonMobil Guyana had benefited from access to the market in exchange for money paid to give it that monopoly or quasi-monopoly over the market. So I'd like to ask if there was an investigation into those allegations of corruption in the granting of licenses for ExxonMobil Guyana and what the outcome of that investigation was. I'd also like to go back to the judicial decisions in 2022 issued by the High Court, which we're able to look back on with regard to the Environmental Protection Agency. According to those rulings and according to concerns that we have received, there is a lot of doubt, a lot of concerns surrounding the Environmental Protection Agency and the way in which it operates. In particular, for example, it's difficult for ordinary citizens to have access to information via the Environmental Protection Agency, particularly information related to ExxonMobil Guyana. So I'd ask the question once again, how does the State Party ensure that the Environmental Protection Agency works independently, in particular is independent from any pressure from mining or oil exploitation companies? And how is the Environmental Protection Agency, this is my second question on that body, working to ensure better access to the public for its documentation, records, etc.? Thank you very much. Thank you, says the Chair. Thank you, Mr. Gruja, for those updated follow-up questions, which I'm sure will prove very useful. The next speaker on my list is Mr. Helfer. Mr. Helfer, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate the responses to the delegation regarding the death penalty, but there are still two issues that on which we would appreciate additional clarification. So the constitutional reform process that is being held this year, it would be especially useful to know how the state party plans to have its officials maintain a consistent and proactive position in favor of abolition of the death penalty. So, as I mentioned in my initial remarks, we have reports of a number of different high-level officials taking divergent positions with respect to the propriety of the death penalty in a number of different instances. And since the state party has made a commitment to accede to the second optional protocol, which precludes the death penalty in all circumstances, it would be especially helpful to know how it is going to lead or manage the reform process in a way that will allow for the government to take a consistent position in favor of the criminal code amendments. I also have a follow-up. I did not hear a response with respect to those individuals who are currently detained under sentence of death in detention facilities, imprisoned in Guyana. As the delegation may know, there are quite a few instances where individuals who have been sentenced to death or for other serious crimes are subsequently become aware of new information that suggests that they may in fact be innocent of the offenses. That can be DNA evidence, it can be new witness testimony, it could be a variety of different things. And the committee's general comment on the right to life has made clear that states parties should provide some mechanism for review and reconsideration of sentences in light of that newly discovered evidence. And if there has been a miscarriage of justice, to provide compensation to individuals who were wrongfully convicted. And so my question is, does such a procedure exist in Guyana? And if so, what sort of remedies are provided to those individuals who have proven that they are innocent? Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Mr. Helfer, for those follow-up questions. The next speaker on my list is Mr. Quesada. Mr. Quesada, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. My thanks also to the head of delegation for her replies. Nonetheless, I do want to underscore a particular point with regard to the complaints procedure for the police. Clarification was provided that the PCA is an independent body that was established by law, that its director is a former judge, as provided for by the law, which provides guarantees of independence and impartiality. However, I'm still not entirely clear as to what the mandate, powers, and authority of the PCA is, and what exactly it is empowered to do when it receives a complaint or is made aware of illegal, illicit activities by the police or activities by the police that violate the law. What does it then do? We have understood that it can receive reports of complaints of all kinds related to police behavior, police conduct, but I'm still unclear as to what it can do to provide resolution. What happens when it arrives at the conclusion on the basis of a complaint or report that a police officer is indeed responsible for the crime or the violation? What can it then do? And that is why I asked one of my initial questions, to which I didn't get an answer, which is what are the links between the PCA and the Attorney General's office and the courts? And again, I underscore the point about what does the PCA do and how does its relationship with, for example, the Attorney General's office come into play when they find that a police officer is at fault? Does the PCA report its finding to the courts? Does the PCA have the power to impose sanctions itself, perhaps administrative sanctions? What can it do? And also a related question with regard to the mandate of the PCA. I asked a question about follow-up of an accusation of the chair of the PCA who publicly accused the police commissioner of standing in the way of the PCA being able to carry out its role and to review complaints lodged against police officers for their conduct. A direct accusation of the police commissioner having transgressed the law that was supposed to allow for the free activities of the PCA. I'd like an answer to that question, if I may. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sister Chair. The next speaker on my list is Mr. El Haiber. Mr. El Haiber, you have the floor. Thank you, Chair. And my thanks also go to Her Excellency for the information that she has provided us with thus far. But I am in a similar boat as my colleagues, in particular as my colleague Ms. Tigruja and her concerns about the way in which certain questions were answered. I have two follow-up questions to ask from my side. First, you said that the law provided for training requirements for staff, civil servants, officials, etc., but particularly for medical staff. So I'd like to understand what explains the difference then in delivery of services, particularly abortion services, between the capital and rural and poorer areas of the country, where there seems to be a major discrepancy on the quality and the conditions of voluntary interruption, pregnancy or abortion services. The committee also asked a question about what steps are being taken to increase or improve women's access to sexual and reproductive health services, particularly in rural areas. On the breast cancer issue, we do have data, we have statistics, we have numbers. And I would like to know what statistics and numbers are held by the relevant authority of the state party with regard to breast cancer numbers, etc. I'd also welcome information on the number and nature of medical screening centres and prevention centres which allow for an early detection and provision of appropriate care for sufferers of breast cancer. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. El Haiber, for those follow-up questions, of which careful note I'm sure was taken. The next speaker on my list is Mr. Carazzo. Mr. Carazzo, you have the floor. I am much obliged to you, Chair, and I also thank the delegation, although I share the same concern about the way that our sources and the reports that we have received have been dismissed to a certain extent out of hand, with references to the credibility of our sources who provided us with reports and information. That doesn't allow for a very positive dialogue when there is such a confrontational response, I fear. The head of delegation referred to several improvements made in one prison without naming said prison. According to information we have received, there are 2 prisons in Guyana which have been in place for many decades now, not been renovated for many decades. They're in a dilapidated state in Masuruni and Ruyusang. And so I'd like to know which of those 2 prisons that has been renovated and improved the minister was referring to. I think reference was made to improvements in terms of infrastructure and service delivery to detainees. But again, which specific prison was reference being made to? The country's, with regards to Guyana and its wider role in the region, many of us have been struck by the fact that there has been the huge oil reserves have been found recently in Guyana, which will give a major boost to income for the country, given the sheer magnitude of the reserves. And we wish Guyana every success in successfully managing this new black gold that it has struck, and it will redound to the benefit of the people at large. Many countries in our region are familiar with oil resources and how this sometimes falls short of actually tackling poverty. And so we have a question as to how the state party intends to manage its wealth gleaned from oil exploitation, from oil drilling, etc., to make sure that it is available to all in society, including tackling poverty, particularly given that Guyana is a fairly new member among the ranks of oil-producing countries. It's a major windfall. So given the major windfall that is expected, we'd like to know more about the plans to make sure this is properly invested in all the people of Guyana to boost living standards, etc., and to boost indicators, particularly poverty indicators, which will depend a great deal on the way in which that wealth is distributed. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Carazzo. Says the chair, that was the last of the follow-up questions for the delegation. So without further ado, Madam of Head of Delegation, we give you back the floor to answer those follow-up questions. Thank you.
Members who've asked the questions. The issue of erroneous allegations, for us sitting here, it is difficult to answer some of these issues which we've never heard or seen of before. The point I made was that a number of the references made to allegations by different committee members have not surfaced in Guyana, nor have they been taken to the police or to the rights commissions or any other complaints body, so that we would be more than willing to investigate, to follow up on any of those. And if the committee could provide us with that, we'd be more than happy to follow up after the review of Guyana. But that we cannot be respected to answer something we've never heard of before. The detention of children with adults, let me explain. The Juvenile Offenders Act makes it very clear that the children were there to be held, and there's a special holding center for children who are awaiting trial and who are waiting to come out from a sentence that they may have had. The law says very clearly that if they reach the age of 17 and they have not completed their sentence, then they're moved to an adult prison. And also they're kept separately from the adults. So that these allegations may be more than interested to know these cases so we can try to rectify. The issue for our country is that we must be able to address. And so we are willing to address these issues once we have the information. The issues to do with ExxonMobil links to EPA. The EPA is covered by statute. And it's also even in the Constitution. The protection of the environment is part of our Constitution. We have taken very seriously the protection of our environment. And therefore, the fact that Guyana is one of the countries intact deforestation, intact rainforest, pristine forests, that we have been able to have low carbon development and to trade with our carbon markets when we have so many gigatons that we can, of carbon dioxide, that we can store, so that we have been good managers and custodians of the environment of Guyana. And the EPA Act has been in place since 1994. So that we do not, the linkage with Exxon, I'm not sure what that means, in that in terms of the EPA has brought in increased fines for flaring, which the Exxon has to pay and get approval to even flare above a certain amount, that I am not aware that there is any cozy or special linkage or relationship between the EPA and Exxon. We also want to point out to you that the World Bank, in a $20 million loan, is assisting the Environmental Protection Agency in strengthening its regulatory framework, particularly with regards to the oil and gas sector, which is completely new to our country. We also wish to add that the access to information which has been raised regarding EPA, the EPA is required under law to maintain a register of information which is open to the public. The register of information includes, for example, each environmental authorization granted by the agency and the terms and conditions included, each cancellation, revocation, variation, or transfer of an environmental authorization, each incident or occurrence causing or threatening serious or material environmental harm that comes to the notice of the agency, and member of the public. Some of the information is available publicly on their website. Some of the information is not. as it would relate to ongoing matters or ongoing investigations, as well as what may be concerns of economic security. Our Access to Information Act is modeled on the Canadian model that while economic undertakings are going on, investment undertakings are going on, these are not made public. The question was asked about 2016 production sharing agreement that was signed and secretly signed. There's been no investigation between 2016 and 2020 of that, and nor from then to now. There may be many concerns that people have, and may even be convinced that there was some form of cozy relationship. However, there is no proof, evidence that we can move forward on this. The question was asked, I believe, in the other one, which I forgot to answer, in terms of the former president's promise to have a commission inquiry into extrajudicial killings between 2015 and 2018. This was not put in place, and we have not also, as the new government from 2020 August, put this in place. The questions were asked about the judicial decision of 2022 with the High Court, and whether EPA is independent of Exxon. Yes, it is. It is a servant of the Guyanese people and the Guyana government in terms of protecting our environment, and therefore it has a right, as any other third party or second party, to join a case to be able to protect their interests. And so the case that was referred to in 2022, it may be convenient to look at it that EPA is on the same side as Exxon, but in this case, it is much more than that, and EPA has a right to be joined as other persons have.
Hi, guys. Good morning. Just a quick interjection here. We thank you guys who have tuned in. We thank you guys who have shared the broadcast. Please continue to share the broadcast. This is important. I sent a message to the PR team of the opposition and let them know the importance of this broadcast, that it should not only be aired here on 107.1 FM Adventure Up Radio, but it should be on all the platforms of the opposition, the APNU, AFC platforms, the PNCR platforms, all those platforms, even some of the MPs. I'm surprised that they are so silent on this important matter. So if you guys continue to share the link, we appreciate it. And text some of your MPs and tell them it's important that they share this so that the people on their pages can hear how guilty share and the installed PPP regime are being grilled by the United Nations. Thank you.
Court against their conviction or sentence based on this new evidence. And if a court decides this new evidence does not warrant a new trial or an appeal, a person can apply for this decision to be judicially reviewed. And so there are recourses available to persons who maybe feel that they're wrongfully accused, and if there's new evidence that would show that they were not guilty or not complicit in any crime. The complaints procedure for the Public Complaints Authority, the law makes it very clear that the Police Complaints Authority has the authority to, and is subject to direction to no authority or person. And so the Police Complaints Authority receives complaints from the public, from family members of persons who may be victims or the victims themselves. It is an open door. They walk into the center and they make their complaint or write to the Police Complaints Authority. Under the section of the Act, the Police Authority must refer to the Commissioner of Investigation Inquiry under the Police Discipline Act. The PC does not have powers to penalize, however, it has the powers to investigate, and it can call for a coroner's inquest. It also can call on the DPP in cases to examine the view of charges being laid against the police officers. The issue that is referred to the Commissioner of Police This has been an ongoing issue in terms of if I remember and if I understand the point that the committee members asking, that there's been a problem sometimes of the PCA requesting files from the police and delays in those files, or police complaints authority has sent those files to the police to produce information. This has been a battle a problem from the early stage. However, as the PCA has developed its own investigative capacity, it has relied less and less on the police files to guide them in their own investigations and the development of their own capacity. Let me just go ahead. I'm waiting for some information on the issue of addressing overcrowding in the places of detention. We have, as we said, taken seriously the statement by the UN Committee on Persons of African Descent who went to the Lusignan prison and basically condemned it in 2017, 2018. We have completed and accommodating now 1,500 inmates in 6 structures. We've already completed housing, and we have been able to construct new facilities, infirmary, and so on. So there's improvement in the conditions of the prisoners. And so there are 5 new main prisons in Guyana, not 2, as the committee member referred to, and they are across all the regions, in the various regions in the country. And there's also, including this, a female prison, which has approximately 50 to 60 people at any one time. We've started construction at the New Amsterdam prison, which has been there from probably the 1800s, and that is also being done. And we're creating a new female prison also at Lusignan. We can go through and provide you with the interventions we've made to improve the health care, the food, the training programs, etc., of the prison population in Guyana, including training programs, providing them with school education so they can graduate from high school with literacy and numeracy, as well as skills. To go back to the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act, it says very clearly that the medical personnel must be done by an authorized medical practitioner. And that is the point I made earlier, that the person has to receive that authorization from the medical council with specific competencies. Where there are theaters, and then there are a medical termination of pregnancy can be conducted, and only obstetricians are allowed by the medical council to be able to do medical terminations. So in some cases, we don't have as yet in all places the facilities for theaters in a number of interior areas. This is part of a program of 12 new hospitals and other hospitals being refurbished across the country, so that, and I referred to that in my initial presentation, which will bring the facilities up to being able to provide basic care and essential care at the secondary level of medicine and healthcare. To do with the cancer numbers that I was asked for, the number of cases of prostate are 88. This is 29.1 out of 100,000. In breast, it is 50 cases, 20 out of 100,000 cases. This is for the year 2022. And for cervical cancer, 26 cases, representing 16.2 per 100,000. All health sites across Guyana and the Public Ministry of Health can examine patients in regards to breast and prostate, and refer them for further diagnosis and treatment. These are figures that are available to us. Sexually reproductive health services are available at the primary health care levels of the public health system. They are freely available, and it's a matter of choice for the patients which method they would like to use. They're also offered to, there are programs for teenagers who are freely able to make decisions whether if they're sexually active as to what to use. Issues of oil investments and conditions of prison, etc. In regards to, I've just commented on the the detention facilities in Guyana. Again, if there are allegations of corruption, we would like to know them. And from my records, the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs was set up in 2020 September, and we are a new ministry, but we don't have any letters or cases being sent to us by the committee of allegations that we could follow up on. And in terms of those that are being made, we would like those organizations to make the information they have available to the government or the relevant bodies so they can investigate them. The issue of the oil investment, in my initial presentation, I made it very clear that the budget of 2024, only 30% of that comes from oil revenue. And in fact, I think sometimes we get confused with what is the potential for oil recovery in Guyana and what is actually being removed. At this stage, we only started with first oil in 2019. So we're very young in this process of the extraction, and therefore the flow of revenue will see its heightening when we reach to 2027 and 2030, not at this point. However, I reported in my initial presentation that the National Resource Fund was passed in Parliament, is an act, and I explained that earlier, that this piece of legislation governs and manages and regulates the use of Guyana's oil and gas revenue. As I pointed out, it is run and managed by a number of committees, the board of directors, which does not have any politician on it, nor any government official on it. The Public Accountability Committee, which is similarly no politician, no government official on it, and also the Investment Committee, which again has no politician and no government official on it, and that this act is really the Sovereign Welfare Fund of Guyana. So all revenue coming in from the oil production has to be gazetted on a quarterly basis and made public, which it is since that act has passed. The funds have to go into the consolidated fund of Guyana, and that the matters relating to the money and the use of the money is dealt with in the National Assembly, reported to and addressed in the National Assembly. This is a far more transparent process and accountability with regards to the revenue that Guyana is making and potentially can make. There are issues where from the 2017-2018 period, the audited reports, these have been given to foreign auditing companies, and which those auditing reports are in progress at different years, and that there are disputes between the Guyana Revenue Authority, or differences between the Guyana Revenue Authority and the oil companies as to what they owe in terms of profit oil, which Guyana is due. One thing I want to add to the committee, when I began, I said in the initial presentation that Guyana was one of the poorest countries in the hemisphere, the Western Hemisphere, with Haiti and Bolivia, right up until 2006, 2011, and then oil came along, and that has begun to change the availability of money to give us fiscal space we never had before to do transformational projects of roads and bridges that will make communication easier, more hospitals and schools that will provide better services for our people, more houses for persons who are low income and working class people, particularly women and disabled persons. So that we came from a spot in 1992 where Guyana was a failed state. It was a collapsed state. The health and education sector was collapsed. There was no housing program. There were no social programs for people. We've come a long way, as I said in my initial reports, but we have to use that as a baseline, whether we like it or not, of where we started from. And so we have made tremendous strides against all adversity, actually. It hasn't been easy. And that, as I said in my initial presentation, it is the first time in post-independence Guyana that there's hope and optimism for the future, that we see the country changing and that people are accessing housing that they could not access for years. And this will continue. We're lucky we have a country that has land, and land we have to protect in terms of our environment, but we also have to help our people live a better life. That's our responsibility as a government, as a people, to ensure that. And the Guyana's voluntary national report to the UN in 2023 provides some data on some of these issues regarding our sustainable goals and where we have reached or attained by now. We take seriously our responsibilities, both in terms of our constitutional laws, and we also take seriously the treaty reports we bring before you. The list of priorities that were given to us is what we followed, and therefore, in good faith, we answered both in our report in 2021, and we're attempting to answer in good faith here. But we cannot answer for some issues which we know nothing about or have no information on. Thank you.
Thank you very much once again to the delegation for your replies. We have a follow-up question from Ms. Tigrouche. Please go ahead, madam.
Merci, madame.
Thank you. Thank you very much to Madam Head of Delegation, Madam Minister. It's very important to hear you and hear your replies to the follow-up questions. I have two comments. Well, one comment and one question, which picks up on what you've just said very eloquently on the very specific situation where Guyana finds itself on methodology, because you insisted on the fact that the information shared with you by colleagues are unfamiliar to you. And I think that Madam Chair recalled at the beginning of the dialogue yesterday that all of the reports from civil society are public and are available on the committee's website. So you have access to those documents just as we do, and that will help you to become apprised of the information that we received as well. So I just wanted to raise that point on methodology. We are not working with secret documents. This material is open to all. I have a very specific question, and what you just said, Madam Minister, is very important indeed. You underscored, and you're quite right, the particular situation of Guyana, moving from a very poor state to an oil-producing state. And I think that the questions that we're asking you about corruption and the structures that are being established is part of the idea that the influence of oil also brings with it some shortcomings. We know that when a state becomes an oil-producing country, that there are major influencers that can come to try to distort or deviate benefits from those who should receive it, namely the Guyanese people. And of course, this Environmental Protection Agency, according to the public information that we receive that is indeed on the website, one of the shortcomings of this agency, now it's just changed. The director has just changed, and it would appear that the person who was the director of the agency before was extremely competent. And when the current party came to power, a month after, the director was changed. And one of the criticisms against this new director is perhaps not to be so well versed in environmental standards, and to allow, therefore, oil companies to come into your country and exploit the oil resources without respecting environmental standards that are very high indeed. So I have a very specific institutional question, and that is, who chooses the director of the agency for environmental protection? How can we be sure? How are you sure of his or her independence? That can be an answer that you give today or tomorrow if time allows. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tigruja, for your question. I do not see any other colleagues asking for the floor. So, Madam Head of Delegation, we have 4 minutes. You can use those minutes if you wish.
Conclude on this day. The issue of unfamiliarity of some of these statements have been made, and we've been asked to issue. We went through the shadow reports that were made available and posted on the website, and there is no report, as far as we're aware, that talks about children in adult detention. And there was also no reference to Vice News and the allegations about the vice president in the submissions by the shadow reports. So that is what we mean about being unfamiliar, because we use the shadow reports as a guidance of what to expect by some of the questions. In regards to the EPA and the question asked about EPA and the shortcomings, you must appreciate, I'm sure, members of the committee, that this is just to be a new country that is oil producing. And that, in fact, the former commissioner or director of the EPA oversaw the 2016 production sharing agreement, which has been criticized by all, including my government. And so I think sometimes that these issues become very partisan. The issue of the former director, he oversaw, he was part of the secret production sharing agreement of 2016. And nobody knew about it until a year later when the press, thankfully the media, disclosed the fact that the signature bonus had been deposited in a foreign account by the government. And so the government has a right to replace the director, and in fact the EPA has a board, and the board is one that reviewed the application and appointed the new a chief executive officer or director of the EPA. I mentioned already that $20 million loan from the World Bank is helping us to set up the regulatory and strengthen the regulatory framework of the EPA, because the act that was passed in 1994-95 had no concept of oil and gas. We only discovered oil in 2015 and started producing in 2019. So the act also has to be brought into line, and this is where the technical assistance of the World Bank is critical. And 70% of that project is completed, and it should be finished by 2025 December. The point made about oil and gas, and let me clarify if I didn't do it properly, and that is that Guyana, as I said in my initial presentation, is a very rich country, and we've been mainly an agricultural primary producing country. Despite the fact that we have oil now, we have put a lot of investment into diversification of agriculture and the economy, and I pointed out new industries of ecotourism and information-based technology, hospitality, and new areas of agriculture. In fact, Guyana is committed at the CARICOM level, the Caribbean community, as a lead in food security for the region, for this area of the English-speaking Caribbean. And so we have been very sensitive from 2020 that we do not want a monoculture We are not going to go down the path that unfortunately other countries have gone, where they've relied and been dependent on oil. We are spending a lot of investment, as I said, in the diversification of the economy. At some point, when oil runs out, as has happened in our neighboring Trinidad, that we are able to stand on our own as a country with a very diverse economic base. And hence that also relates to our carbon markets and the fact that we've been able to have carbon revenue from our protection of the environment. And so we do not wish to fall prey to the experiences of other countries. We are trying very hard to create the legal infrastructure, which we've done with the Natural Resource Fund and the Local Content Act, to make sure that Guyanese benefit through the sectors, the private sector, so that we do not become dominated by persons who are only and exclusively involved with oil and gas and leave nothing for our people in terms of skills training, opportunities, etc. Oil gives us the opportunity to have the fiscal space we never had to invest in these areas of transformational infrastructure. And this is supported by a number of international financial institutions. We recognize the sensitivity of what we're doing and that we're trying as best as possible to ensure that our people benefit. The fact that our budget this year, that I gave the figure for the increase in education and health, and I wish to refer to the commitment made by Guyana through its Prime Minister, Mr. Mark Brigadier, retired, Mark Phillips, that we made 5 pledges at the 75th anniversary of the United Nations Human Rights Declaration. One was to continue to protect and use our low carbon development strategy as its contribution to climate change and protection of planet Earth. 2, as a new non-permanent member of the UN Security Council, to protect international rule of law and the principles of multilateralism. 3, to continue to incrementally increase our budget support for education, health, housing, and water, social protection, and the development of our indigenous communities by X% annually to ensure that no one is left behind. 4, to continue to build institutional capacity of our constitutional oversight bodies, in particular the electoral management body and the judiciary. 5, continue to build the institutional capacity of the national mechanism for reporting and follow-up on Guyana's human rights treaty obligations. Madam Chairperson, on the latter point of the national mechanism, we have held workshops in the last 2 years on human rights.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Head of Delegation, Your Excellency Gail Teixeira. This concludes proceedings for today. Just to say that we really appreciate how much effort you put into responding to our questions. We know that time is not on our side, and I know I'm speaking on behalf of all my colleagues in thanking Guyana for its efforts in replying to our questions. As I say, that wraps things up for today. We'll meet again tomorrow afternoon, Geneva time. Once again, thanks to all those who've been following this dialogue, representatives from the world of academia, civil society organizations, as well as colleagues in the committee. We are also thanking those and acknowledging those who are following us online. Our thanks also go to the conference services, to AV services, to technical services, to the interpreters. Thank you for granting us the additional minutes to allow the dialogue to wrap up for this afternoon. And thanks also go to the Secretariat of the committee, some of whom are sat here on the podium with me. And particular thanks to my colleagues in the committee for their questions and for their dedication and input into this interactive dialogue. Thank you very much. We'll meet again with the Guyanese delegation tomorrow at 1500 Geneva time.
They'll meet again, 1500 Geneva time. It's a live broadcast. You guys saw for yourselves, so there's no need that we get right into it. The PPP regime, they usually have no shame. They are embarrassed by this. And the fact that they have been exposed, they have gone there ill-prepared. And again, they have absolutely no shame. So it is now in the hands of the opposition how they are going to handle this particular situation, how they want to handle it, how they should handle it, in my opinion. It should be handled with great urgency. They should call a press conference. They shouldn't wait until Monday. I'm sorry, Thursday. Today's Tuesday. Um, Today is Tuesday. They should have already called a press conference or preparing to call that press conference. Um, I'm not sure what's the leader of the opposition's position on this, but the leader of the opposition's office issued a statement. Um, and of course, that is good that a statement has been issued, but we need to go beyond statements. There should be an immediate reaction to what um, immediate reaction to what Gail Teixeira just said there and how she was actually grilled by those individuals. And what Gail Teixeira has to understand is that what the Gail Teixeira has to understand is that the UN reporters, the UN guys, the commissioners, the folks who do their investigations, they're very thorough. And they don't sit down in a road corner, eat two puri, two polori, drink some swank and some white pudding or black pudding and cassava pone and get their information like that. They're very thorough. They fact check, they double check here, double check there. And that's how they operate. Um, so don't for a moment think that's it. And so what Gail Teixeira thought that she was going to be able to go there with her little twang and feel that she could have put blinkers over the eyes of those individuals at the UN. It didn't happen. They didn't believe her story. I mean, I am not telling you guys this as in any way, shape, and form as propaganda. You heard it for yourselves. The people said, hey, you have dodged our questions. You weren't thorough, and you evaded a heck of a lot of those. And the people know better. The reason the people know better is that they have done their homework. And there are folks behind the scene who have met with these individuals, and of course, credible individuals, credible sources, evidence have been presented. And so the people are just, thorough with their investigations. They know that Gail Teixeira is just basically lying off the top of her head, so to speak. We'll be right back. I'll take a quick, and yeah.
Yeah, my name is Jacinty Caldata Francis Vietnam, and since 1965 I become a voter, and I always place my ex next to the cup. And what they are doing today, I can't take it. So I have no more vote to give to PPP anymore. I'm not going to vote anymore no more. If they have to lose by one vote, they're losing it by data. I have none.
All right, welcome back. Guess what? I decided to go straight over to Congress Place. We have the leader of the opposition, Aubrey Compton Norton. Mr. Norton, I'm not sure if you had a chance to listen to the 4099th meeting of the 140th session of the Human Rights Committee, where Gail Teixeira was testifying, where she was taken to task by the commissioners, the investigating team. In other words, they basically in my opinion, thought that she was lying. What is your take, sir?
Well, I've confirmed that she wasn't speaking the truth. For instance, this morning I sent to the UN and to other stakeholders around documentation to establish, one, that we did bring a motion to the Parliament asking for an investigation into Jack Dale, and that it was denied. So that is one thing, the motion. We also send them copies of our press statement indicating that we had requested investigation and the government refused to investigate. So we have provided the evidence that she's in a different corner to truth. But it is normal for the PPP to lie on these issues. What I think they miss is the existence of social media. And so people can be following, and when they make these comments, question them. And so the information is out there, and it is evident that she was lying.
And so just, we did see that release that we're back in 2022, you called for an investigations on the allegations made by Sue against Barra Jack Deal. But can you give us an update as to what the police said to you guys, or the agency said about that request?
Well, remember, we did not engage that the police was in close collaboration with the People's Progressive Party. And therefore, to ask the police to investigate Jack Dale would have been charging Caesar to be tried by Caesar. And so what we opted for is to call on them to ensure that there's an investigation, and the investigation should have international investigators to ensure that the government itself doesn't torpedo it by virtue of its control of the Guyana police force.
In light of this this hearing by the United Nations, and taking into consideration that the police force is politically motivated, many of those senior members are being controlled by the PPP. Do you think it will be prudent of you, the opposition leader, to approach the police now, calling for the investigations, to put the ball in their court, so to speak?
Yes, we are prepared to write the police, but let us not forget, during the local government election, there was ample evidence that the PPP forged people's signature. You had a case where the dead signed, and Jack Deal himself had to apologize. But yet the police force told us we have to send people to the station to make reports. We did that. We sent the people to make reports, and the police did nothing. So we were right, but I don't anticipate anything from the Guyana police force. The leadership of the Guyana police force is compromised, and therefore they cannot act against the leadership of the PPP.
Well, at least you'll get that on record, that because you do recall that Barra Jack Dale himself bluffed the nation by calling for investigations. We haven't heard anything of that sort at this point in time. And so hence my reason for asking whether you guys are prepared now to have that matter
we'll probably consider later. As soon as I get the exact documents from the UN where we could cite exactly what Gail Teixeira said, we will dispatch a letter to the police. So
the revelation today from the UN there doesn't come, or revelations, they do not come as a surprise to you at all, especially since Gail Teixeira has been boxed in a corner with those questions.
No, they don't come as a surprise. We have long been arguing that the government is authoritarian, the government is corrupt, that there are high levels of fraud and bribery in the society. And in fact, we were providing information to the international community on the levels of corruption, etc. And so I don't think it comes as a surprise to even ordinary Guyanese. I think every Guyanese, one thing we all have common on is that the government is corrupt.
Absolutely. Anything you wish to add on this particular special hearing? It's going to continue tomorrow as well. They spoke about the EPA. We saw Gail Teixeira dodge those questions. They spoke about the judiciary. They spoke about the police complaints authority. And all these things Gail Teixeira seemed to have dodged.
I came out of a meeting to talk with you, but let me say this to you. We have been outlining the authoritarian nature of the government, the attempt to control the judiciary, to control the Guyana police force, the prevention of APNU, AFC reps on boards. Yesterday, she lied again and said that we were the ones not submitting information today for people to go on the board. I can provide information where once they ask us, we did. For instance, the last thing they asked for was a representative on the Natural Resource Fund Investment Committee. We provided a name and a CV of the person, and the government refused to appoint the person. When I went ahead a while back and say, look, we're in agreement that you should confirm Justice Cummins and George Wilshire, sorry. And when I did that, I put it in writing, and the president wrote back saying we can't tell him when and who to appoint, and so he never bothered with it. So for them to now go and say they ask us when it is not true, and even the suggestion that we should, even if they don't, that has been destroyed by Irfan Ali's own comments that he will do it when he thinks he should do it.
You know, I know you
so
said
that's the situation.
Yeah, I know you said you came out of a meeting quickly, Mr. Opposition Leader. The fact that Gail Teixeira was brave enough to say that Guyana was a failed state prior to 1992 is ridiculous, don't you think?
Well, look, Gail Teixeira is parroting what she was told to say. She knows that Guyana only arrived at a failed state status around the time of the extrajudicial killing and when policemen had to be hiding because of the level of lawlessness that was ongoing in the society. And so she knows full well that any idea of a failed state started under the People's Progressive Party. When Desmond Hoyt and the PNC left government in 1992, you had law and order. The economy was on the upswing. So to say that, she's just being disingenuous.
88 bullets before you go back into that meeting. 88 bullets from policemen shooting at another policeman. Your take, Mr. Norton. 88?
Well, once you have the police force with an acting commissioner who isn't certified or qualified for the job, what happens almost immediately is below him, people began to do what they like. Plus, if you add it is politicized, then you will know different sections of the force will have different instructions to carry out different actions. And that is why you can find a situation in which one section of the police force is shooting at another section and they seem not to have any coordination. It's a manifestation of the destruction of the structure of the Guyana police force.
Thank you for your time, sir. Appreciate it.
Oh, I should also add, it's also a reflection of the return of drugs and drug trafficking that is impacting law enforcement.
Especially in the light of a wanted man being caught right there in Guyana, who lived right opposite the U.S. Embassy there in Duke Street.
I don't know if you saw the picture with the First Lady and his wife together. Have you seen the picture?
I wouldn't miss that, Mr. Opposition Leader.
Oh, good. So, well, that's a clear indication. All right.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark.
The leader of the opposition there, Aubrey Compton Norton, giving you guys his take on what just transpired there at the United Nations. And if you just joined us, we were just commenting, the opposition leader gave his views on the 140th session of Human Rights Committee, where Gail Teixeira was being grilled. And of course, she ought to be embarrassed because she didn't. She wasn't prepared at all. Those investigators at the commissioners of the Human Rights Committee of the UN, they were well prepared. They did their homework. They got their stuff, and they are going to be back tomorrow. And we are going to be back tomorrow to carry that broadcast right here on 107.1 FM, 107.1 FM. We will carry that broadcast. So until then, I'll see you later tonight on 107.1 on Straight Up. My name is Mark Benshap. Talk to you. Tata.
Yeah, my name is Jacinty Caldata, Francis C. Vietnam, and since 1965, I become a voter. And I always place my ex next to the cop. And what they are doing today, I can't take it. So I have no more vote to give to PPP anymore. I'm not going to vote anymore no more. If they have to lose by one vote, they're losing it by data.
Oh, Jesus Christ, if cost of living double, I don't know what happened. A pound of sugar is $300 already. flour, everything gone up. Everything just raising. You gotta get about $40,000 for buy good ration. You gotta get 3 man now. A weekend man, a monthly man, and a fortnight man.